12th of September will mark the official change of command in Multinational Corps Northeast, and this is when Lieutenant General Manfred Hofmann will hand over his duty to his successor, but also will close his long-standing and fruitful military career. On this occasion, we are here today with General Hofmann. Welcome, sir.
Welcome, Marta.
Starting from the beginning, let's move back to August 2015. Do you remember your first thoughts and your attitude when you stepped into this office as a newly appointed Commander MNCNE?
Yes, during the last few days I remember a lot of times my first moments here in the Baltic Barracks. When I arrived, it was late of July 2015, and I was calling with the acting chief of staff in that time, the German one, General Niemann, who was the acting chief of staff, and I asked him, hey, could I join in Baltic Barracks a little bit in advance to get some clue what's going on? And he told me, yes, you are able to show up, but there is nobody here because we are in the summer leave period. And I asked myself, hey, my God, what's going on here? Because I was told by my government, there is the Newport decisions on this NATO summit in Newport some months ago, and this headquarters has to start a completely refinement process on the high readiness stage. So I was a little bit concerned at the very first beginning, but it was only on a short time. Then some days later, I was welcomed by my predecessor in that time, General Sammel. And sitting in this office was, let me say, deeply impressive to see all this, let me say, connections and cooperations for that time being for the MNCNE is a very decisive point to be a training platform for all these affiliated units. But we didn't have a lot of time to chat again, about the future. Because the president was announced to come to the takeover on the 13th of August 2015. So my friend Boguslav was really committed to get all these things in the right place. So it was a challenge, but on the other side, it was also a clear signal sent by our host nation Poland that the president of the Republic of Poland was willing and was really straightforward to show up here in the takeover process at the beginning of a new part of the history of this headquarters. So a very impressive first, let me say, fortnight with a lot of deep impressions at the very first beginning on high-ranking officials on the political side and the military side.
But as you've mentioned, starting here in the time that you did was like jumping into a car that's extensively speeding up, because your 3 years in command of this corps was the time not only of important changes within the corps, but also within NATO, its policies and postures. When you look back at those 3 years, which event do you consider to be the most important milestones?
At least for us here let me start with MNCNE. That's a little bit the easiest portion of your question, to answer your question. The most decisive milestones at first was, for my understanding, our first exercise where we started to prepare ourselves for the first certification on the REP tasking. That was Trident Joust, which we executed in Bydgoszcz in the training area, and that was the first time that we were able to deploy at least our initial command element to a foreign region, to Bydgoszcz, and train together in a common understanding on the new processes and procedures. That was the starting point for a successful year 2016 with the REP certification in summertime. And the second and most decisive point was definitely 2017, the high readiness certification exercise, and both of these exercises in 16, also in 17, just followed by other exercises, so in a continuity. So these two peaks in summer 16 and 17 marks very decisive steps forward for MNC Northeast. In the overall NATO environment, the most decisive point was for me personally, when I got the feeling in a series of conferences that the way of MNC Northeast in that new understanding, being or acting in a regional responsibility, was more and more accepted. So at the very first beginning, there was misinterpretation, misunderstanding. The one and only corps who is directly dedicated to an area, to a region, and regionality and specialization, regionalization for that time was not, let me say, a narrative in NATO. And at the first meetings, at the first conference, in the first 1.5 years, there was permanently a way to underline what we are doing, to explain what we are doing, and a lot of, let me say, not understand what they are doing. We are here, all the other 8 HRFs are here. And this decisive point was, let me say, at the end of 16, in autumn 16, in one of these conferences, where we started on all commanders level in such a conference to discuss about new steps forward for NATO, to cope with the challenges which are in place, which are reality or felt reality or assessed reality, and how to react. And this point, regionalization or specialization, was no more from that point under discussion. It was a fact which we have to discuss about that. And looking forward to NATO's adaptation process, which is a running process, as we know, I hope that we could find the right place for MNC Northeast in that. It's again not an easygoing thing, because it has to be communicated and agreed and coordinated within all NATO, 29 for 29, and NATO definitely has a lot of challenges also aside our region. But this was a starting point, and that is from my point of view, this situation, what I just have described, has led directly to this adaptation understanding nowadays. And that is internally and externally the 3 events which I call from my side, from my point of view, as a very decisive in the last 3 years.
Of course, the transformation of headquarters, which was operating at a low level of readiness to a high level of readiness, to becoming the most important NATO HQ in this region, in the Baltic region, is not an overnight event. It takes a lot. So from your perspective, from the commander's perspective, what does it take to go through such a process?
First and foremost, you have to start to create a mindset. A mindset, a team understanding, a team spirit, which is dedicated to such a task. So you are not able, no commander is able to do it by orders. So the mission command understanding, the freedom of development, all these capacities and capabilities which are in such a staff, has to rest and stem on a mindset which is directed to reach the overall objective. And that was a point where I concentrated myself from the very first beginning to say, okay, all in Baltic barracks belong to this team. There is no difference between our civilian colleagues which are working hard here for the MNC. There is no difference between the national support elements and the staff. There is no difference between the officers and the NCOs. So it's all, we are all dedicated to one task given to us from the 3 framework nations. And we have to fulfill the expectations of NATO and our nations here in that region. Not easy, because the most decisive factor on all this task given to MNC Northeast was always the time. So for the rep certification, the preparation starts definitely not earlier than 6 months in advance of our certification, because in the rest of the year 2015 we have to integrate all the new incoming people. More than 100% we increase the number of the staff here in that headquarters. We have to train them, we have to get the trainings for them, we have to get to create a team understanding and team spirit, not only in the overall headquarters but in the branches, in the divisions, in the staffs. And that means a lot. And a new structure, around about, let me say, the double number of personnel mostly new guys here in that region, and that means a lot. So the basis for all of that was to focus the team especially on that, and I was heavily supported. though the command group was a new established level of decusses, 3 one-star generals here in that house, under the lead of the Chief of Staff and DCOM and I myself. We felt that there is a lot of self-commitment. There's of feeling this responsibility, especially of these soldiers and NCOs, officers and NCOs coming from the 3 Baltic states and Poland, definitely. But all the others also, and you see it on the number of nations which are willing to contribute to MNC Northeast posture. It's 25 in that situation, with Iceland, as we know. So 25 flags. So it means nearly all NATO was committed. Under this impression, on the Ukraine situation, which was a trigger point, or one of these trigger points for the decisions on the Newport summit, we got this understanding. So the most decisive point, again, to underline it from the very first moment, is in my understanding, what I did all my 44 years in service, to wake up all the possible synergies of such an headquarters, not respecting what rank, what professionality, what functional area. The whole setting is decisive at the end of the way. And I think we made it here in Szczecin.
Sir, you are summarizing your long-standing military career with this post. Could you tell me how does this, how does service here in Szczecin fits into your long and fruitful curriculum?
Yeah, that's a really funny story. It's a really national, funny military story. Because in all armed forces, you start your career, let me say, on normal posts and taskings in the different levels, on a lower level, platoon level, then battery level, and so on and so on. And later on, when you are turning from to a professional soldier, somebody in the personnel management is taking over your career planning. And that was the same for me as a part of the German Armed Forces. And my career was a switch between commanding posts and responsibilities, and a lot of, let me say, challenges which I have to cope with in the personnel management system. So at the end of let me say, coming nearer to the end of my duty, that was so around about 2014 or 15, I was directly responsible for the new creation of a new structure of the personnel management system in the German Armed Forces. And I was what I never want to be, a vice president. It's for a soldier, it's absolutely no-go to be a vice president or deputy commander. That's okay, but vice president is a challenge. But I'm only joking. It was really a decisive post to create a new structure. And my understanding was, okay, now I'm straightforward for the last 3 or 4 years of my service to put that tool to a working tool for the political family, for the Minister of Defense, to create a wonderful, let me say, personal management which fits to the challenges of the new situation. And suddenly somebody find in my papers, okay, this guy is also able to command and control. So I commanded a battalion, I commanded a battery, that's quite obvious. I commanded a brigade. I was the chief of staff of the army command. In such a time I was chief of staff in Sarajevo in the mission Altea. So I did a lot of commanding, but I was not in the understanding it goes directly to Szczecin. So by surprise, I got a phone call from the political guides, and they told me, hey, we have a plan for you. And the plan is to take over the responsibility in Szczecin to bring this headquarters from a lower readiness level up to a high readiness level in a short notice of time. I was really wondering, and then I told these guys, wait and see, I will answer next day. And I discussed all this issue, definitely with my family, because it means something. We know about that. It's for 3 years. It's a challenge. It's a time-consuming task and appointment. And the question is to move with the whole family from Germany to Poland, what to do and how to cope with that situation. And we find a way during the night. And next day I replied positively, and that was the whole story to be here in Szczecin. And at the end of the day I could only underline It was the right decision. As I mentioned at the very beginning of our short interview, it was not every single day delight, but it was a huge professional satisfaction at the end. So what could it be better at the end of 44 years to say, okay, I'm really satisfied.
So we started with you entering this office, and now, soon, in a few days, you will leave. What thoughts will you take back with you, and is there something that you would like to leave as your legacy?
Yeah, that's especially the most decisive and challenging point. I have to free myself from an idea to transfer some heritage to my successor. So that's not my posture. What I want to hand over is a well-oiled machine, and I think MNC Northeast is really running as a well-oiled machine. Also, we have this rotation in that period of time after the first 3 years. That's a normal procedure, but because of the delineation of the tour ends of our staffs, I'm quite sure that we could keep our high level of readiness. So what I want to hand over is running projects. Not to say I finalize on things. So I have some issues have to be solved in a common understanding between outgoing and incoming commander. Ongoing things where the new commander has a decisive role. So we are not ready with our internal adaptation. There are some quick wins which we have realized on a short notice. That's absolutely okay. But how to create the headquarters concept under the conditions of these developments during 2017 and early 18, that is prepared as a recommendation. And my successor will decide after a while when he is integrated in this headquarters and knows about that. We should avoid a situation, and I want to avoid a situation that the year 2019 is 150% fixed, so-called is put it in concrete. That is not the way we should do that. So the new commander has the freedom to change a little bit, to do it in his understanding, to put his commanding understanding on top of the development of MNC Northeast. And in that understanding, I think the team is really ready to succeed also in 2019 and the years to come.
Thank you very much for this interview.
You're welcome.